Hello, AxeCon. Always wanted to say that. I am Sightless Combat. I'll introduce myself in a second, but there's a title slide here showing Kratos and Thor from God of War Ragnarok preparing to fight each other with their various weapons, the Leviathan axe for Kratos and Mjolnir for Thor being raised, ready for battle. Oh, there we go. Oh, yeah. There we are. Thank you so much for having me here, AxeCon. Really appreciate it. It's great to come back after last year's talk on Sea of Thieves, which some of you might have seen. And welcome to God of War Ragnarok, hammering home accessibility. And with that terrible pun, the journey begins. As for who I am Sightless Combat. Most people just call me Sightless Combat or SK. Any of those three. I am a gamer without sights, content creator, accessibility consultant, and most recently, accessible gaming officer at RNIB, that is Royal National Institute of Blind People, the UK-based sight loss charity. And as for the picture here, I've got a picture of me wearing my trademark cap with my logo on it and holding a replica of Mjolnir, that being Thor's aforementioned hammer from God of War Ragnarok, which came in the amazing collector's edition that I was fortunate enough to receive. Now, I did mention I'm a gamer without sight, and you're probably wondering what that means. And I use the term because legal blindness, often just shortened to being blind, can and often does include usable and or residual vision, which I've never had. So if you're wondering, how much I can see, I can't see anything at all. And if you're wondering how long I've been doing accessibility work, I've been doing this for probably about the last 8 or so years now. Been doing freelance consultancy stuff and then moving to RNIB last year. But as for how I play video games, it's really through audio cues and accessibility features, intended or unintended accessibility through, things like audio or haptic feedback or things like that, as well as sometimes sighted assistance, as you will see later, or optical character recognition, or OCR, which, again, we won't be covering here, but essentially it extrapolates text from images, even if there is no text. But it is a method that's been used for multiple games I've played over the years for various reasons. But to illustrate just how key audio accessibility is, which is a topic that will kind of come up as we go through this, I actually played a lot of Killer Instincts back in the day, the reboot, which is having its 10-year anniversary this year. And Ken Lobb, one of the original creators of the franchise back in the 90s, and I fought a few matches against each other on 2 separate occasions, and I beat him in both, which it was a great time had by all, and it was a really fun thing. And you can actually find those matches on my YouTube channel, which will be linked at the end of the presentation. Speaking of that, though, you may have seen my streams on Twitch, including God of War Ragnarok. You may have read a review on my website. You may have seen me in the credits for a game or heard me voicing some audio description. But today, I am here as part of this presentation to talk about my journey through the franchise, about a dad and boy, because that's the unwritten rule of how you have to say it, and talk about the accessibility improvements that allowed me to achieve much more in terms of comparison to the Game of the Year for 2018, which was, of course, the original reboot for God of War, the soft reboot, if you will. There we go, the beginning, and that is God of War 2018's accessibility settings shown there. So my journey with the God of War franchise, though I knew about the games long before, started in 2018, as it happens, when I went to Guerrilla Games in the Netherlands for some consultancy work that I was doing on what became Horizon Forbidden West. And there I was going to play various games, including Horizon Zero Dawn, which is another great game, at least from my streaming journey, but that's a whole other story. But I did ask about God of War, because there was this new game that had just come out, not long before, and I'd heard so many good things about it. And I said, have you got a copy of this to try? And they said, yes. And so I was ushered to their very cool press room at Guerrilla Games, Dolby certified surround sound, immersing me in the audioscape, DualShock 4 controller in hand, because this was PS4, And I thought, I'm ready for this. This is going to be great. Fast forward to a little while later, and I'd never played anything like it. Fluid combat, sound that was absolutely jaw-dropping, particularly with when a giant serpent comes out of a lake. And if you know, you know. And score that was very much reminiscent of movies, the works, absolutely phenomenal experience. But as much as I enjoyed, learning to block and try to parry where I could and figuring out what was going on, the key thing was that there was no accessibility in this game for gamers without sight. What this actually meant in practice was that I needed constant sighted assistance for pretty much everything, whether that was moving from one objective to another, understanding what was going on in the cutscenes because there was no audio description, and even understanding what the controls were because I'd never played a game like this before. And how did this sighted assistance come about? Well, turns out it's not exactly comfortable because me and my sighted assistant were squished together on the same bench, couch, sofa, however you want to describe it, squished together, holding a single controller between us. And as I say, it wasn't comfortable or ideal for either of us. But it definitely did give me a taste for the narrative and the experience in general, and I really wanted to see what happened next. My first playthrough, and there's a picture of some game cases that you're going to hear about in a second on the screen. And cut to Christmas of 2018 when I received, thanks to relatives, games for my shiny new PlayStation 4, namely Uncharted 4, Spider-Man, and of course God of War. And using my PS4, I really wanted to get through as much of the adventure as I could. I was keen to get stuck in, and I had to find a way to make the sighted assistance more of a straightforward process and less of a uncomfortable ordeal. And I used a setup similar to the one I use on stream, and we'll come on to how that works in a second. But it involved Copilot. And what do I mean by Copilot? And there's the Copilot option of the Xbox accessibility menu shown there. And what I mean is that Copilot is an Xbox system level feature that allows two controllers to simultaneously act as one. So that means that I could be moving, or I could be aiming and firing weapons. I could be picking up items. I could be, doing what traversal I could, while a sighted player in the same room as me, because that's what we mean by local in this instance, is able to help me navigate through menus or things that I can't physically do due to, limited accessibility and a lack of agency, which is a key theme, really. But Copilot, as much as it's a feature of the Xbox and Windows platforms, it also is the catch-all term I use to describe a sighted player, whether that is locally in the same room or, as you will see later, online. But as you can understand, this local system, because you've both got your individual controllers and you're both sitting in different areas of the room, it does remove the squishing problem and make it a much more comfortable experience, which is, a key part of being able to enjoy the game you're playing. But this is PlayStation we're on about. How does this work? So there's a picture of a device that I will describe in short order on screen. How did I achieve similar results to the Xbox ecosystem when I wanted to play on a PlayStation 4? With the device that you see on screen, a rectangular box, a small rectangular box with a couple of buttons and a couple of ports, both front and back, known as the Titan 2 from Console Tuner. What this actually does is you plug two controllers into the front, or you can have one controller in the front and then connect it through a PC to something like Parsec, which we'll come on to a little later. And whatever you do, in terms of the PS4 setup I used, it was just two controllers in the front, just plugged into the console of choice. And they both, again, simultaneously act as one. And that allowed me, with the sighted assistance and the Titan 2, I really enjoyed my first playthrough of the main story, learning how to parry projectiles back at enemies, on a relatively inconsistent basis, at least at the beginning, because I wasn't good at it. But I really enjoyed the main narrative experience of the game, which it was phenomenal and still is to this day. And I'd highly recommend all of you play it if you have the assistance or ability to do so. But I also really enjoyed the tough combat challenge because I hadn't really played any combat-oriented action games like that up to that point. But it's not to say that I didn't, I didn't still need the assistance constantly. I relied on my co-pilot to do pretty much all the extraneous work. So navigating to objectives, switching targets in combat, trying to find where collectibles were and puzzles and things. And, occasionally just getting very, very lost and then having to look up a guide, just because there was not enough agency for me to be involved with any of that. But I knew that I was missing so much from this experience. And to remedy that, in a sense, another person had to get involved. New Game Plus, and there's an introductory slide, or introductory screen for New Game Plus, rather, saying that, it's the New Game Plus screen for God of War 2018, showing that equipment and hack silver, which is the game's currency, will carry over to your next game. What is New Game Plus, though? I assure you this will all become relevant. New Game Plus is when you've played through a game and you've done everything there is to do and you want to start the game again, but feel overpowered as anything most of the time. And in most cases, that means carrying all your equipment, your abilities, your stats, everything over to a new playthrough, and sometimes making the enemies harder as well. Not all games do this, notably Fallen Order. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order didn't carry over all the force abilities, but most of the time it will carry over your various boosts that you've acquired throughout the run. Given there is no picture on screen of the person I'm about to discuss and introduce, because there is that aforementioned start screen, allow me to introduce the wonderful Janissary, certified audio describer, skipping her wonderful origin story, certified audio describer, professional as well, and community collaborator, wonderful individual from the United States, a gamer with sight, and co-founder of the Transcribing Games project. What is Transcribing Games? Also, hashtag Transcribing Games if you want to look up things on Twitter for that. It is a project that we founded, mostly starting with God of War and the key beats of that, revolving around audio description, which I'd mentioned earlier. And I've done previous presentations on audio description if you want to find out what that is as a process. But essentially, it was adding audio description to pre-recorded video game footage, thus meaning that without needing sighted assistance, you could know what was going on in the cutscenes and all the references would make sense. But it does go deeper than that in the form of text transcriptions of the cutscenes as well. So you can actually see how all the names are spelled, which is quite useful when you're, again, looking up guides, or just read descriptions of the characters, the weapons, the items, the locations, and enemies and things like that as you go through. But putting together these videos, of God of War 2018's story beats, which you can find in a big playlist on YouTube, because Janissary is a massive God of War fan. We decided as a team to go through and 100% the game working together, thus earning the Platinum Trophy, which is when you get all of the trophies in a PlayStation game. And that was a phenomenal experience because my combat skills improved massively. And we worked out a system using Parsec, which is a piece of software I mentioned earlier, which is online, and it's used for anything from arcade game tournaments online to remote working and things like that. But that wasn't initially how it worked. So initially, Jenna had no control over my game at all and had to verbally guide me, which, as you can understand, probably was quite tedious, including for puzzles as well. Puzzles is a topic that will resurface later, but Parsec provides low latency control for both players. It's essentially online co-pilot, so you're both simultaneously controlling the game as if it were one player controlling it. And a big part of New Game Plus, because we wanted to 100% the game and do everything we'd already done again, was taking on the Valks. And there's a picture of Kratos fighting an enemy who will be named in a second. Valks, being short for Valkyries, are optional bosses in God of War 2018, optional tough as nails bosses. And they are, some are easier than others. That must be said. The 8 standard Valkyries that are scattered around the realms, when defeated, will allow you to fight a 9th boss, Sigrun, a 9th and final optional boss. These are really end game content, so you're meant to fight these later on in the game. And Sigrun who is the Valkyrie shown in the picture, fighting Kratos, who's just punched her in the face. Sigrun takes a lot of the moves from existing Valkyries and adds a few fun twists of her own. Did I say fun? I meant very, very annoying. In order to fight these Valkyries, you have to essentially build your character the right way. So by build, I mean, stats and armor pieces and runic attacks and all sorts of variables, as you would see in this kind of action RPG or role-playing game kind of experience. But they also require sighted assistance to even get to and participate in, as well as the call-outs I mentioned earlier. In particular, given the situation we were in, where Jenna had no control over my game. And if you want to see what these callouts were like, so they were mostly for things like area of effect attacks, so AoEs, as they're often called, or for knowing where to move, where to dodge to, whether an attack was blockable or unblockable. If you want to see what these attacks were like, here's a clip from one of my streams a few years ago, showing a fight with Gondel, the fire-based Valkyrie who likes to throw lava around the arena. And I won't speak over this because then you can hear Jenna's call-outs to me and watch me respond as well.
Clear left. Clear left. Lava right, so be careful.
Ow.
Ah, that was unfortunate. Up. Nice.
I wanted to hit
Clear right. You are at half health. Remember you have rage.
And you'll notice there was a call out there for up as well. That's sometimes shorthand for, very specific moves that enemies can do. And that's all decided on a player by player basis as you're working through with these co-pilot collaborations. And Ragnarok, there we go. There's a splash screen with the game's title showing as well for those that are curious. God of War Ragnarok was eagerly anticipated by many, myself included. After all, the fact of the matter is, you would be interested if you could engage with any franchise that was previously off limits, regardless of whether you have a disability or not. The hope was that Ragnarok would be fully accessible, playable from start to finish, much like Naughty Dog's Last of Us Part 1 and 2 are. And Last of Us Part 1, of course, is coming to PC later this month as of the time of the original broadcast of this presentation. How did all that hope come about, though? It came about through an article released as part of Global Accessibility Awareness Day in 2022, showing details of some of the features planned for God of War Ragnarok's release later that year. The article did make a few surprising omissions, including any references to menu and user interface or UI narration, which was definitely a problem and was a concern to a lot of gamers without sight like myself, because after all, if you can't access the menus, then how are you going to get through to play the game as you would want? How would you even set it up to meet your own needs? But suffice it to say that the transparency shown by Sony Santa Monica in releasing any of that information at all, particularly correlating to gamers without sight, allowed me and so many others to maintain hype for a staggering 7 months before the game got into the hands of reviewers. I was very lucky to be one of those reviewers, and we discovered, upon putting together early first impressions, navigation improvements. So this is the navigation assistance tutorial stating that the game, the navigation assist will guide you to the next point in story progression while out of combat. Remember that for later. Now, previously, as I've mentioned, in God of War 2018, my first, experience with the franchise proper, there was no navigational assist. So, I had to have sighted assistance to get pretty much anywhere, including on the critical or golden path for story progression. But now in Ragnarok, with a singular button press, and as well as moving forward with the left stick, I could actually, navigate reasonably smoothly between, elements, whether that was, to the next cutscene, to the next combat sequence, or to the next, puzzle, which again, we will come to in a minute. This system was imperfect, admittedly, and got you stuck or was misguided or slightly broken at other times, pointing you to where you needed to go directly rather than, where you needed to go to, say, trigger a shortcut to get down there or up there or to, throw things at an object. But the point was, it definitely allowed long stretches of the game to be played without having to call somebody every 5 minutes and say, "Can you help me, please?" Much to the dismay of the person you were trying to yell at from a long distance. But if you want to see a clip of this system in action, here it is, starting with the end of a combat sequence, and then yeah, you'll see. So I've just thrown the axe into an enemy.
All right. Where's that?
And now I'm pressing the right stick, which is that little bloop noise. And the navigation assist has got me stuck here, so I'm having to roll around. And now I'm running because I can hear the footsteps. And in a second, we get into a combat sequence again. And so that was actual, live gameplay as well. So that was why it was, also sudden. There was no cuts to that. The combat sequence just popped up. Speaking of combat, though, combat improvements. We've got Ragnarok's weapons menu with Kratos holding the Leviathan axe. And yeah, I didn't mention this before, but I'm going to be clear. I was honored to be able to consult on this game and work on it remotely, which is a great option, regardless of where a team is in the life cycle. It's a great option when in-person visits aren't, a thing that you can do for whatever reason. And I'm actually in the credits of Ragnarok for my work on this game and my assistance to the team, which was an amazing thing to be able to do. Given I'd fought the Valkyries in the previous game, one of my favorite things to do was to be able to give advice to the combat team, because those fights, amongst many others, allowed me to understand what needed to change for the sequel. And there were a few things, this isn't an exhaustive list, but, the first one of which was lock-on now being able to remain unbroken in Ragnarok, whereas previously, so enemies can, fly around, they can dodge away, they can move behind cover. And in God of War 2018, that could cause massive problems because even though you had a lock-on, you had no audio cue or any kind of cue to tell you that the lock-on had been broken. So you would try and hit an enemy with, say, a ranged attack, and you would miss completely because the enemy had flown away and then back into your range, thus breaking the lock. In Ragnarok, though, depending on how you have your settings set up, you can actually, guarantee that wherever your enemy is, you'll be able to at least find them and run in and connect your attacks or do so from ranged. Audio cues as well. I've briefly mentioned a lock-on cue, and you've briefly heard it there during the navigation clip. But there are also now audio cues for various types of attacks, including unblockable attacks and what we loosely term as ring attacks. So there are certain types of attack that you can either parry or that will break your guard. They're not strictly unblockable, so you don't have to dodge out of the way, but they are attacks that you definitely want to be mindful of. So in God of War 2018, these didn't exist, and they now do. Those specific types of cues are all found in the audio glossary, which is a great addition again. So that covers all the accessibility related cues. Now, the interesting thing about it is that God of War Ragnarok's unblockable cue is actually the dodge cue from The Last of Us Part 2, which is a very interesting way to do sort of, knowledge sharing or sharing of ideas, if you like. And it definitely does put the fear in you when you see an unblockable attack and you've played enough Last of Us to know, I need to dodge this. And now we come to the third point, the lock-on cue. I'd already briefly mentioned it and shown it off unintentionally. And though it doesn't change like the one you'd see in The Last of Us Part 1 and 2, when you're aiming at, parts of an enemy, so the head, legs, center of mass, etc., it's definitely useful to know that you are locked onto something, and especially when a status effect like blind, ironically, does break the lock, which does happen, and it makes a lot of sense when it does, though it does make it annoying to then try and hit your enemies again. But it's a very useful cue to have so that you know that you are definitely locked onto enemies in combat as well. Combine that with a cue for when you're aiming at range and you can connect with an enemy with, say, an axe throw, then you get a pretty robust informational palette of sounds. And to demonstrate this palette, I'm going to show you a clip from a fight with a Dreki. It's a boss fight from It's a boss fight from comparatively early on in the game, and this fight shows it off pretty well. I'm actually not going to speak over this, but suffice it to say, it's essentially a loop of informational audio cues I'm listening for and patterns that I've learned. So the strings of attacks that my enemy can undertake at close range, and then I'm dodging back for the larger area of effect attacks. So I'm going to roll the clip and just see if you can pick out what's going on, and along with the visuals as well. So as you can see, that's kind of a loop there, which makes a lot of sense when you figure out how the boss works. And it's a very fun fight. And that actually was on Give Me God of War, so the game's hardest difficulty, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Puzzles! I said we'd mention this, didn't I? So there's a screenshot of Kratos aiming at a fallen tree that's blocking his path here. And there's a little like puzzle reticle over it. Puzzles date back to the earliest entries in the God of War franchise, and of course they're present in Ragnarok as well. So in Ragnarok they can lock you off from the best gear, they can lock you off from side areas which you wouldn't necessarily be able to get to even with the navigation assist being present in the first place, because of the aforementioned slight brokenness of it, shall we say, for lack of a better way of putting it. But unfortunately the puzzles can also lock you off from story progression. The screenshot you're seeing now is actually from relatively early in the game, and it's a puzzle that you can complete as long as the navigation assistance doesn't, as I say, break too much. But I've had relatively little issue completing that puzzle on the multiple playthroughs I've already either begun or finished. But there are puzzles later on that require you to aim arrows at multiple targets and then activate them with a weapon. They're called sigil puzzles. These sigil puzzles they can seem relatively frequent in places, and they are very frustrating because the targeting methods used in combat don't actually work for these because they are not targets in combat. So you then have to get sighted assistance, at least as of the time of recording. So that's very unfortunate indeed, and it can make the game take far longer than it actually would if I had enough agency to be able to complete those puzzles myself. And while not specifically a puzzle, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Noken, a small, rather obnoxious singing enemy, and I use the word singing in very loose virtual air quotes. These enemies, if you've ever played Doom and you know about the Archvile or that kind of enemy, you will know about the various buffs that those kinds of enemies can inflict as well. And the idea being the Noken will buff enemies that are in the vicinity and keep them from actually being able to be killed while it's alive. So the objective is that the Noken is priority. You go and find it and you kill it, and the enemies are then able to be taken down easily, like normal. Simple, right? Not quite, because the Noken are always hidden behind things like brambles or hidden pathways that, of course, you can't navigate to because you're in combat and navigation assist doesn't work inside combat, which is such a shame. But I thought might as well mention the Noken because they've been a source of great frustration over the various times I've played through sections containing that particular enemy type. And you definitely know when they exist because of the sounds they make, and you just start thinking, oh no, not one of these again. And other elements, as well as seeing all these improvements and potential challenges as well that have come with the various accessibility implementations, there are other elements as well. And there's a picture of the first page of accessibility settings for Ragnarok. And, whereas the previous game didn't have any menu or UI narration, and that was a big problem because I had to just learn patterns for, say, loading and saving my game and try and hope I'd remembered it right so I didn't break anything. Ragnarok at least partially delivered on rectifying this problem because it had the main pause and the save menus actually sort of mapped out amongst a few others to then be able to be navigated with pre-recorded non-adjustable files. Now, speech rate is a big thing. I put out a YouTube short recently illustrating just how fast screen readers that I use on a daily basis actually are set to, compared to what most people would probably assume without prior knowledge that I read at. So essentially going from relatively slow to faster than most people would believe. And that's why speech rate is important, and that's why I pointed out the non-adjustable nature of these files, because you end up taking a while to wait for the information to be read out to you, as opposed to having it read at a speed that you're comfortable with. That being said, though not all of the menus read in Ragnarok, so things like the skills, the shop screen, and the map, to name a few, they're not read, as of the time of recording at least. This was a good step in the right direction to allow me to understand and navigate the UI within the limitations of still needing sighted assistance. Also, though, the new haptic capabilities of the DualSense on the PS5 are great, not just for immersion, but for sometimes information about whether you're on fire and things, if you can't hear the effects, above as part of the mix. But that being said, being able to adjust that mix, so things like turning up the dialogue, turning down all the music and everything, and having the screen reader at the right volume, can definitely make a huge difference as well. And of course, that's not an exhaustive list of the changes that were discovered during early first impressions, including things like camera priority for targeting of melee attacks, etc. as well. Give me God of War. There's the difficulty menu for Ragnarok with Give Me God of War selected. I said we'd mentioned this earlier, and I've managed to come back to it because there are various difficulties in the last couple of games of God of War, and Give Me God of War. In the last couple of God of War games, there are various difficulties included. In Ragnarok, these consist of Give Me Story, Give Me Grace, Give Me Balance, and Give Me No Mercy, and then swiftly followed up by Give Me God of War, the game's hardest level. And these change various aspects of things like parry windows sometimes, or the amount of damage enemies can take, the amount of damage they do. And in God of War Ragnarok or 2018, enemies are brutal, merciless. They just won't stop. Wait a minute, that's the Terminator. But that's beside the point. My point still stands, because in God of War 2018, Give Me God of War was not to be underestimated, because it turned a cool melee action game into what some might describe as a Souls-like, that being like Dark Souls or its ilk, whereby you die a massive amount and you spend hours on any individual fight, and it is a grueling trial by fire. And with Ragnarok allowing for much more accessibility, and particularly in terms of combat, I thought, against my better judgment, I thought, why not? I'm going to try and play through as much of Give Me God of War as I can with as minimal sighted assistance as possible and challenge myself. A series of unfortunate events. And there's a screenshot of Kratos looking down into a snowy arena in Midgard here. And a series of unfortunate events is right, because though the opening went well, that's because there's not much fighting to do in the very cutscene heavy start to this epic narrative continuation. Early encounters were good fun, though, good learning experiences of mostly blocking, retaliating, and figuring out what patterns I could work with, which enemies I had to focus on first. Going through bosses and brawls and other fights that took me hours, if not days, sometimes weeks. I got to one fight where I thought, this might have been a bad idea. And where do you think that fight took place? In the arena in the screenshot, because this fight involved a bunch of varying enemies. So you had an ogre, which is a larger enemy, and a bunch of smaller reavers, with all of whom seemed to power up at the earliest possible opportunity to make their attack patterns even more unpredictable and hard to deal with. And now the idea of this fight generally is that you can use the ogre to take the reavers out. So use the larger enemy to defeat the smaller ones and leave the larger one as the only problem. But there were a couple of issues with this as a gamer without sight. And I tried this fight so many times to try and get round these. So there are no cues for regular attacks. I've mentioned before that there are cues for unblockables and guard breakable attacks and parries and all sorts of things, but there are no cues for straight up, straightforward regular attacks that will just kind of hit you out of nowhere. They're the kind of attack that you can't see coming, even if you have vision. So you'll be fighting one enemy, and then another one will come in from the side and go boop, and you're dead, which is far from fun, especially when you maybe have one or two enemies left in a run. And, adding on to that, you can't tell what you're locking onto, because as much as there's a queue for lock on, enemies only have queues really when they're attacking. Some will have movement queues, but they are usually very, very subtle indeed, or, as I say, completely non-existent. So the only way to really reliably work with that, without sighted assistance, is to just move in while they're attacking and hope that the target priority system picks up on who you're trying to hit and making sure your attacks connect. If you want to see an example of how sighted assistance gets around this problem, I did release a YouTube highlight, a stream highlight on my YouTube channel from a fight that happened literally last night with another wonderful collaborator by the name of DB, who, was kind enough to offer the assistance of which target I was locked onto. But there were other compounding elements outside of just the fight itself that were a problem at this point. And gear is one of these, and there's the armor tab in the God of War interface showing various stats and numbers relating to items. Remember I said about builds? At this point in the run, I hadn't actually optimized a build. So what do I mean by that? I mean that, if you want to optimize a build, you would create it around, say, stun, offense, defense, or runic, those kinds of things. Various elements of armor and, weapons and things that you could put together. But, that being said, given I'm unable to navigate side quest content, at least without lots and lots of sighted assistance, or, to find the best loot, I was stuck with very underpowered gear without really a way to rectify it. And I knew that from the hours and hours and hours of trying this fight, the brute force, as far as I could tell, wasn't going to cut it. And I felt like I might have to give up on the run altogether. The solution, and there's the Ragnarok shop menu showing the various tabs, including, weapons, armor, resources, sell and special items as well. Not wanting to be stuck on this fight for an eternity, I swallowed my, at this point now, wounded pride and, decided alongside Jenna and DB as well that, I would complete the game with sighted assistance where required, including in combat, because most of the time my combat skills weren't in question. It was just, a matter of a lack of information, I guess you could call it. Because, were the accessibility implementations for, the narrated UI to allow me to adapt my gear correctly, or the navigational assist to allow me to get to the side quest content and all the other loot more robust, for example, then, I wouldn't need the sighted assistance in the first place. The funny thing was that fight that I just mentioned about the ogres and the Reaver, eventually, by sheer, if you'll pardon the pun, blind luck, I actually managed to beat it. And that was no easy task. But it was, again, by, complete good fortune, because the target priority system enabled me to target the smaller enemies. And I only realized after a little while that the ogre was the only one left alive. And using the stereo audio, when I got the ogre into the stun state, where other enemies can spawn in, I managed to utilize that to my advantage so that the ogre could deal with at least most of those as well, which was a fantastic thing to be able to pull off. And rest assured, you will see that fight in a future YouTube video that I've been putting together for a little while that isn't released as of the time of this presentation. So keep your eyes peeled for that and keep on the lookout. And suffice it to say, as of the time of recording this, I've actually got a fair amount further in the game, and I've been able to get through multiple other fights, including optional side quest battles. And I'm still working my way through the story. Not to say that it's easy, but I've got past that fight, and I'm glad to say that I have. So, but that's not to say I'm not stuck on other things as well. And doubtless you will be able to see those adventures on stream in the future. Where next? There's Ragnarok's goals screen there showing the objectives. God of War Ragnarok's story may be over, but the cast of characters, who knows what's going to happen for them next. It might be something to do with the TV series that's planned later down the line. Who knows? But I've really enjoyed engaging with the world and the systems at play here. God of War Ragnarok did set a new standard for combat-oriented games, disregarding, of course, the scaling and leveling issues. And it definitely shows that accessibility is a bar to be raised and reached, well, raised and not just reached and left alone. And the tireless and wonderful work of Mila Pavlin, who's now working on the Wonder Woman game, and her colleagues at Sony Santa Monica, definitely goes to show that you can, adapt a sequel to make it even better than the original. In terms of any games in the future, I really look forward to being able to play more games, including combat-oriented titles like that, with these accessibility settings and other elements that carry through from other titles. In terms of key takeaways, In terms of key takeaways, I've got a few here for you. Though 93% of blind people can see something, there are so many others in that gap of 7% who can't, like myself, who just want to be involved with these games and be a part of the cultural and social experience that video gaming has become over the last several decades. The earlier you implement accessibility, the less costly it will be and the more robust your end result will be as well. That's always a key thing to remember. Implement accessibility as early as possible, whilst also getting feedback from players who know your genre and your franchise as well throughout development, which can drastically improve your understanding of any accessibility issues that are in the game. I hope this presentation has been enlightening and insightful, and I will be happy to answer any questions. You'll find my contact details at the end of the presentation. With that being said, thank you very much for listening. Any questions?
Woo! Like combat.
And there's a shot of God of War Ragnarok's map screen showing the lake and shores of Nine as part of the Midgard location. And there are all the links. So, questions?
Wow, what a session. Sightless combat. This was amazing. Also, I didn't realize I was speaking to a celebrity. You have so many fans in the comment section letting you know that this was amazing. You are super welcoming, even in your Discord. People love everything that you went through. I'm going to start you off.
Kind.
I'm going to start you off with some easy questions, and then we'll dive into a couple more complex ones. But let's go with question number one. This says, as someone who is blind, do you find more gaming console systems are more accommodating than others? Not asking you to endorse anybody, but give us a little bit of opinion.
Okay, good question. So I would say there are certain systems that are definitely less usable than others, shall we say? But in terms of I will say specifically, PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X do have, or X and S, and the rest of the family of consoles do have very good narrated user interface implementations, and that's why I tend to gravitate to those. But of course, you can't forget about things like PC as well as a platform, which, although it does have its issues as well through various platform system implementations not necessarily working well with screen readers, you can definitely find holes in pretty much anything if you look hard enough. But I think console accessibility is improving. I just feel like we need to wait for certain players in that to catch up, I would say.
That makes sense. Thank you so much. The next question is, how much impact does the quality of headphones have on immersion in the game? And I guess a part two, what headset is on your head right now?
All right, I'll go reverse order. What headset is on my head right now? This is the Logitech G935. I've had these for a bunch of years. It's actually a wireless headset, but I've got it tethered via wires because you can do that. And I've got a mod mic clipped to the side of it as well, from Antlion Audio or Antlion Audio, depending on how you want to pronounce it. In terms of headphone quality, it's always an interesting discussion because I guess it's subjective. But I don't go for the sort of virtual surround headsets necessarily. I prefer to have my signal, unaltered in, even if it's just in stereo. I prefer to have it unaltered by interesting, almost reverb effect, I would describe it as. But of course, it's all subjective. Depends on what you want to go for, and you can even play games via things like Aftershocks, the bone conduction headphones, or they're now called Shocks, the bone conduction headphones, if you really wanted to. But if you go for these more powerful headsets, then you're definitely going to get a more cinematic experience, I suppose.
That makes sense. That makes sense. This is a combo, so get ready. Part one. Do you dabble in any FPS games? Think Apex Legends, Warzone, Fortnite? And I guess the part two would be, how do you navigate games that lack auto-aim features that make it difficult to pull off ranged attacks?
So the answer to that is no, I don't, but it's because of those lacking, aim assistance features. I wouldn't say assistance, but like these range finding things where you can hit things from range. The closest I can really say I work with is probably Gears 5. That meaning that, I will, because of that game's accessibility, so with PvE, so player versus environment, you're just fighting AIs in things like Horde or Escape. Up to a certain difficulty level, you can have target lock where you have to still aim and do parts of the work yourself, but the game will kind of finish the rest of the lining up for you. So you can turn to the left or right, line it up. You can move up or down. And if you've got it in the right place and then you shoot, the game will sort of detect that. So unfortunately, FPS games, sort of even the popular ones, haven't caught up with the accessibility for gamers without sight yet. But I'm hoping that will happen in the next few iterations now that we're seeing stuff like this become more common.
I'll tell you, people in the chat are hoping the same. There are a lot of people looking to get into some of those games, but they're finding a lot of limitations. So they are
Definitely, yes.
Now, this one has a little bit of a prologue, but it will make sense as we get through it. The community around gaming has notoriously been hugely inaccessible in a number of different ways. How do you think we can open up the subject of accessibility to the community of players more so that we get less of an ideology of the game is meant to be played or enjoyed in this specific way, and more of enjoy this game however you access and play it? As a player with cognitive disabilities, I'm often deterred from playing because how I would like to play isn't considered right.
That's interesting. It's all around, I think, rhetoric, raising awareness, and of course making content accessible as well. So if you're posting, GIFs of your gameplay on Twitter, make sure you put alt text in it, or on any other platform. As long as the platform supports alt text, you should put alt text in it, or at least put the description in terms of the alt text in replies and things as well, so that everybody knows, this is what I've managed to do in this game or whatever. That's part of it. But the other part of it is also, of course, being able to raise awareness through things like videos, through live streams, having creators who are putting that content together, being uplifted and promoted and endorsed with things like sponsorships, whether from companies, developing the games or outside of that, to raise awareness of, the work that they're having to do to, play the games in the first place is a great thing. But there's a lot of answers that could go into it. I feel like it's mostly just a matter of people being willing to share their stories and raise awareness of how they're playing, and to say, this is how I play it because of these reasons. And then just, if people don't think that's right, that's on them to an extent as well. So
Now,
it's all about being willing to share it with the people who care, and just be less frustrated by the people who don't seem to understand the issue at hand and are just saying this isn't right because you're not doing it the way it was intended.
yeah.
So,
I like the way that you took it, because you took it to a lens of be the change that you want to be. Let's be vocal about how it is that we're going about this and raise this community. So beautiful take.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, we only have time for one more question, so this will be the last one. I want you to plug your community. The fans are happy. You have a Discord. Talk to us about that community and how people can join it.
Okay, thank you very much. So you can, if you want to get hold of RNIB, you can email gaming at rnib.org.uk to get information on their research as well. As I say, I am their accessible gaming officer. So if there are any consultancy opportunities, if you're working on a game and you want to throw it to a gamer without sight for testing or anything like that, you can do that. You can find me on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube as Sightless Combat, LESSKOMBAT, and usually my Discord is linked in those various places, but you'll find it on my Twitter as well. So it's under my link tree, and then you go into there and you'll find the Discord as well as other things. Do feel free to go and drop a follow, go into the Discord, say hi, say you've seen this presentation, and any questions, etc. that rise from that. But thank you so much for having me, AxeCon. It's been an absolute pleasure to come back. The question is, what do you want to see from me next year?
Yeah. Great question. Time for us to wrap up, everyone. I want to say thank you to DQ, thank you to RNIB, thanks to Sightless Combat for an amazing session. Thanks to everyone for attending. Enjoy the rest of AxeCon 2023.